Hollywood did not just bend history. It grabbed history by the collar, threw a wig on it, added explosions, and told everyone, relax, this is basically accurate. Today we are exposing the historical facts, movies quietly planted in your brain, from Scottish kilts that arrived centuries late to pirates with imaginary treasure maps. Some of these lies are so famous, your history teacher probably believed them too. 1. Braveheart is a legendary movie, but as a history lesson it should probably come with a warning label and a helmet. William Wallace charges into battle wearing a kilt, clan tartan, and blue war paint, looking like Scotland's angriest festival mascot. Tiny problem. That style of kilt did not appear until around the 16th century, roughly 300 years after Wallace died in 1305. In his real world, Scottish men wore tunics, cloaks, and clothing similar to other Northern Europeans. And the blue face paint? That is more connected with the ancient Picts, who were around over 1,000 years earlier. Then the film gives Wallace a romance with Princess Isabella of France, who was about 3 years old during the events. So yes, Braveheart is epic, but historically, it is basically medieval fan fiction with bagpipes and confidence. 2. The movie 300 gave us the nightmare image of Spartan elders inspecting newborns and tossing unworthy babies into a pit below Mount Tegetus. Very dramatic, very Spartan-looking. Also, probably nonsense with abs. Sparta was harsh, no argument there. They trained boys brutally, worshipped discipline, and treated weakness like a software bug. But when archaeologists studied the pit tied to this story, they did not find piles of baby skeletons. The remains were mostly adult males between 18 and 35, not infants, not even close. The baby-throwing story largely comes from Plutarch, who wrote centuries after Sparta's peak and clearly enjoyed turning history into premium drama. Modern researchers think the pit was used for executing criminals and prisoners, not unwanted babies. Hollywood saw Sparta was intense and upgraded it into a baby disposal chute because apparently regular brutality was not cinematic enough. 3. Titanic gives us that crushing scene where third-class passengers are locked behind iron gates while rich passengers float away in lifeboats. It works emotionally because it makes you want to punch a chandelier. But history is messier. The gates were real, but they existed because United States immigration rules required passenger classes to be separated during transatlantic crossings to reduce the spread of disease. During the sinking, some gates were opened late, and steerage passengers were absolutely delayed. But it was not a clean villain plan where someone said, "Save the rich, season the poor with seawater." It was panic, bad communication, language barriers, and a crew with no coherent evacuation plan for third class. Many passengers did not speak English and had no idea where to go. The tragedy and class inequality were real. The deliberate murder-by-gate storyline is Hollywood turning systemic failure into one neat evil visual. 4. Hollywood thinks the Middle Ages were one long bath strike. Every medieval village looks like mud learned to walk. Dirty peasants, rotten teeth, flying chamber pots, and not a bar of soap anywhere. But medieval Europeans were not permanent biohazards. Bathhouses were popular in many towns and could include wooden tubs, steam rooms, food, conversation, and entertainment. Basically a medieval spa, but with worse towels and more suspicious soup. People washed hands and faces before and after meals, used soap, combed hair, and cared about not smelling like a dead goat in July. The truly anti-bath attitude grew stronger later, when some early modern doctors claimed hot water opened your pores to disease. So the era movies call filthy may have been cleaner than some periods that followed. Medieval people had plenty of problems. Existing as sentient mud was not supposed to be one of them. 5. Movie Gladiator fights always end with one man down, the crowd screaming, and the Emperor doing the famous thumbs down like he is canceling a bad restaurant reservation. Almost all of this is suspicious. Gladiators were not just disposable meat bags with sandals. They were trained professionals, expensive to feed, house, and prepare. Owners invested serious money in them, so killing one after every Bad Tuesday would be terrible business. Many fights had rules, referees, pauses, and structure. Most gladiators fought more than once because dead celebrities are famously bad at selling future tickets. And that iconic thumbs-down gesture? Historians are not even fully sure what direction the thumb pointed or what exactly it meant. The modern version was boosted by a 19th century painting and then welded into our brains by Hollywood. Real arenas were brutal, yes, but they were also business. And business hates wasting its most marketable abs. 6. Ancient Egypt movies love showing miserable slaves dragging pyramid stones under the desert sun, while overseers whip them like the world's worst project managers. It is iconic, but for the Giza pyramids, the evidence says no. Archaeologists found the workers' village, and it looked nothing like a slave camp. These builders were skilled laborers organized into crews. They slept in planned housing, received medical care for injuries, ate well, and were paid partly in bread and beer. Not one sad sip either. Around 4 to 5 liters a day. Pyramid construction suddenly sounds like the harshest construction job with the strangest benefits package. Workers even left graffiti with crew names like the Friends of Khufu Gang, which sounds less like slavery and more like a bowling team that can move limestone. Hollywood loved the whip scene because it is instantly dramatic. History says the builders were organized, fed, treated, and probably very proud. 7. Movies treat the Great Wall of China like one perfect ancient mega-wall stretching across mountains in a single heroic line, basically the world's longest stone snake. Reality is less tidy and much more chaotic. The Great Wall is not one wall. It is a massive network of walls, trenches, watchtowers, forts, packed earth barriers, and defensive lines built by different Chinese dynasties over roughly 2,000 years. Some early sections date back to the 7th century before the Common Era, while the famous stone portions tourists visit today mostly come from the Ming Dynasty, beginning in the 14th century. And yes, there are gaps. Lots of them. Some parts were dirt ramparts that eroded. Others were simple ditches. The total combined length is over 13,000 miles, but calling it one wall is like calling every fence in Texas one fence. Hollywood loves a clean mega project. China built a giant historical patchwork. 8. Ask people about the Salem witch trials, and many imagine women tied to stakes while flames rise and villagers scream like they just discovered theater lighting. But nobody was burned at the stake in Salem. Not one person. Witch burning was more associated with parts of Europe. In Salem, Massachusetts, in 1692, convicted people were hanged. 19 died on the gallows. Then there was Giles Corey, an 80-year-old man who refused to enter a plea. The court used pressing, placing heavier and heavier stones on his chest for 2 days to force him to speak. According to later accounts, his only words were, "More weight," which is one of the coldest final lines ever recorded. Corey became the only person in American history executed this way. No flames, no stakes, just legal cruelty so awful, Hollywood somehow made the fake version less disturbing than the real one. 9. The Marco Polo pasta myth is adorable. He travels to China, sees noodles, returns to Italy, and heroically introduces pasta, as if Italians had been sadly staring at flour for centuries. But Italy already had pasta long before Marco Polo was born. Evidence of pasta-like food goes back at least to the 4th century before the Common Era, with Etruscan tomb art showing tools that look connected to pasta making. The ancient Romans had dough-based dishes too, and Arab traders brought dried pasta traditions to Sicily around the 9th century. By the time Polo came home in the 1290s, Italians had been working on pasta for over 1,000 years. The myth likely came from a misunderstanding of his travel account, where a Chinese starch food was compared to pasta. That comparison mutated into Marco Polo discovered pasta, proving you can arrive late to dinner and somehow get credit for inventing the kitchen. 10. The Dark Ages sound like Europe turned off civilization after Rome fell, and spent centuries sitting in mud waiting for the Renaissance to bring Wi-Fi. Hollywood loves that gloomy version. No science, no learning, no progress, just torches and bad dental plans. But the so-called Dark Ages were not brain-dead. Eyeglasses appeared in Italy around the late 1200s, helping people finally see more than vague, human-shaped fog. Mechanical clocks emerged in the 13th century and changed how societies organized time. The heavy plow transformed Northern European agriculture. Major universities like Bologna, Oxford, and Paris were founded during this supposedly stupid era. Architecture, navigation, law, and scholarship all developed. The dark label originally had more to do with limited written records than limited intelligence. But complex period with uneven documentation does not sell as well as everyone was filthy and confused until artists arrived. 11. Picture a cowboy. Your brain instantly gives him a wide-brimmed Stetson because Western movies have been emotionally bullying us for a century. But on the real frontier, one of the most popular hats was the bowler. Yes, the round little British-looking hat that seems designed for polite bankers and Charlie Chaplin escapes. Butch Cassidy wore one. Billy the Kid wore one. Bat Masterson wore one. The Stetson boss of the plains existed in the 1860s, but it was expensive and not nearly as universal as Hollywood suggests. Working cowboys wore whatever was cheap, durable, and stayed on their head in the wind. Bowler hats were tough, practical, and surprisingly good at not flying off during actual work. So the next time you imagine a dangerous outlaw entering a dusty town, put a tiny round hat on him. It is less majestic but much funnier, which means history wins. 12. The Imitation Game gives Alan Turing the spotlight for cracking Nazi Enigma during World War II, and Turing absolutely deserves admiration. But the film nearly deletes the Polish mathematicians who broke Enigma first, which is quite a magic trick for a movie about code breaking. In 1932, Marian Rejewski of the Polish Cipher Bureau reconstructed the German Enigma machine without ever seeing one. He worked with Jerzy Rosiecki and Henryk Zygalski to create methods and devices for reading Enigma messages. In July 1939, just before Germany invaded Poland, the Poles handed their work to British and French intelligence. That included their math, methods, and decryption machines. Gordon Welchman at Bletchley Park later said the British effort would not have started properly without them. Hollywood made a powerful Turing story, but shoved the Polish team into the historical broom closet. They deserved better than being treated like bonus DLC. 13. Ancient Rome. In movies apparently had one outfit setting. Toga. Senators wear togas. Rich men wear togas. Random citizens stroll around in togas like they are trapped in an endless laundry commercial. But the toga was formal wear, closer to a tuxedo than everyday clothing. It was used for politics, religion, and official public events, and only male Roman citizens could wear it. It was heavy, awkward, and had to be carefully draped, often with help. Doing normal daily tasks in one would be like mowing the lawn while wrapped in a bedsheet at a wedding. Most Romans wore tunics for everyday life. Men, women, children, slaves, freed people, almost everyone had some kind of tunic because tunics actually let you move like a human. Hollywood dressing every Roman in a toga is like showing modern people wearing tuxedos to bed, to the gym, and to buy onions. 14. The Library of Alexandria is often shown as one giant tragic bonfire. A single night, one catastrophic fire, all ancient knowledge gone, humanity instantly set back centuries. Very cinematic, mostly false. The library did not vanish in one clean explosion of stupidity. Its decline happened slowly over centuries. Rulers cut funding. Scholars left for places where people actually paid them. Scrolls aged, decayed, and were not replaced. Alexandria suffered political chaos and conflicts that damaged the institution bit by bit. By the time famous fires or invasions get blamed, the library was probably already a weakened shadow of itself. The real killer was not one villain with a torch. It was neglect, budget cuts, bureaucracy, and shifting priorities. In other words, the Library of Alexandria may have been destroyed by ancient administrative nonsense. Somehow that is less dramatic, but more painful. The villain was not fire. The villain was paperwork with sandals. 15. Movie samurai are usually honor robots with swords, silent, noble, allergic to betrayal, and ready to die before doing anything practical. Beautiful image, very suspicious. The Bushido Code as people imagine it today was heavily romanticized and formalized long after the samurai's messiest centuries. During the Sengoku period, from 1467 to 1603, Japan was a festival of clan warfare, betrayal, shifting alliances, ambushes, and political scheming. Lords changed sides when it helped them. Warriors used surprise attacks. Honor existed, but so did survival, ambition, and the ancient art of stabbing someone's plan in the back. And the idea that samurai hated guns? Completely false. After Portuguese traders introduced firearms in the 1540s, Japanese warriors adopted them enthusiastically. Real samurai did not reject useful weapons because they lacked poetic sword vibes. They wanted to win. If a gun helped, congratulations. The gun was now honorable enough. 16. Caveman is one of the most successful misleading words ever invented. It makes prehistoric humans sound like they spent all day living in caves, grunting at rocks, and waiting for someone to invent curtains. But most prehistoric people did not live in caves full-time. Caves were used for rituals, art, temporary shelter, and special places like Lascaux in France. Daily life usually happened in built shelters. By the Upper Paleolithic, people were making tents and huts from animal hides, wooden frames, and mammoth bones. These were portable, practical, and could move with food sources. Living deep in a cave permanently would be cold, damp, smoky, dark, and basically the worst Airbnb in prehistory. We associate early humans with caves because cave paintings survive while tents rot into nothing. The evidence that lasted longest gave the wrong impression. Tent people would be more accurate, but it sounds like a budget camping documentary. 17. Medieval castles in movies look like sadness rented a stone building. Gray walls, bare halls, dim torches, freezing rooms, and the vibe of a place where laughter was outlawed in 1184. But that is what ruined castles look like after centuries of decay, not how they looked when people lived there. Real castle interiors could be bright and flashy. Walls were plastered and painted with reds, blues, greens, golds, patterns, flowers, and scenes. Rich households hung tapestries that worked as both decoration and insulation, because stone walls are beautiful until winter starts bullying you. Floors had rushes or woven coverings, and furniture could be carved and painted. A great hall in its prime might have looked more like a colorful political theater than a dungeon. Hollywood saw the ruined leftovers and assumed everyone medieval lived inside abandoned tourist attractions. That is like judging a wedding cake by the crumbs 800 years later. 18. The Curse of the Pharaohs sounds ancient, spooky, and perfect for a narrator whispering over sand. Open a tomb, disturb the mummy, and the dead king sends you straight to the afterlife. Great story, mostly newspaper nonsense. When Howard Carter opened Tutankhamun's tomb in 1922, the world went wild. One newspaper secured exclusive coverage, leaving rival reporters desperate for anything juicy. Then Lord Carnarvon, who funded the expedition, died months later from an infected mosquito bite. That was all they needed. Suddenly, headlines screamed about curses, fake inscriptions, mysterious deaths, and supernatural revenge from a very petty pharaoh. Reporters connected unrelated tragedies and inflated coincidences into a horror franchise. Meanwhile, Carter, the man who actually opened the tomb and handled the artifacts, lived another 16 years and died at 64. If that curse was real, it had worse aim than a stormtrooper and the patience of a sleepy accountant. 19. Hollywood loves Cleopatra as the ultimate Egyptian queen. Gold jewelry, Nile drama, eyeliner sharp enough to cut policy. But ethnically, Cleopatra VII was not Egyptian. She belonged to the Ptolemaic dynasty, founded by Ptolemy I, a Macedonian Greek general of Alexander the Great. The Ptolemies ruled Egypt for nearly 300 years while keeping their royal bloodline Greek, often by marrying inside the family. Yes, the family tree was less a tree and more a tangled phone charger. Cleopatra was Macedonian Greek by ancestry. What made her exceptional was that she actually learned the Egyptian language, unlike many Ptolemaic rulers before her, who apparently ruled Egypt with the linguistic confidence of tourists ordering lunch by pointing. She embraced Egyptian religion and culture more seriously than her predecessors. So her Egyptian identity came from politics, language, and image more than blood. Hollywood remembers the crown and forgets the Greek family reunion. 20. Every movie sword makes the same dramatic sound when drawn. That sharp metallic swing, as if the blade is announcing its entrance like a celebrity on a talk show. But real swords did not usually do that. Medieval scabbards were commonly made of wood lined with leather, sheepskin, or oiled material to protect the blade from moisture and rust. Pulling steel from that would make a soft sliding sound, not a full orchestra of danger. A metal scabbard scraping against a blade every time would dull the edge and damage the weapon. No warrior interested in living past lunch would think, "Yes, please ruin my sword for cool audio." Hollywood sound designers added the ring because realistic silence is not dramatic. A quiet sword draw does not make the audience sit up. So they invented the noise equivalent of a tiny firework. And now everyone thinks history's sharp objects came with built-in sound effects. 21. Indiana Jones made the Holy Grail feel permanently cup-shaped. A humble chalice, the cup of the Last Supper, waiting for a professor with a whip and father issues. But the first literary Grail was not a cup. In the late 12th century, the French poet Chrétien de Troyes described the Grail as a grail, which meant a wide, deep-serving dish or platter. Basically, fancy dinnerware. Later writers, especially Robert de Boron in the early 13th century, transformed it into the cup of the Last Supper and connected it to the blood of Christ. That version became the one legends in Hollywood adored. So one of the most famous sacred objects in Western culture started its career closer to a serving plate than a magic goblet. Somewhere in medieval literature, a waiter is furious that his dish became the object of global treasure hunts and conspiracy boards. 22. Picture a ninja. You probably see a figure in tight black clothing, moving through the night like a shadow with cardio training. Great visual. Bad history. Real shinobi in feudal Japan were spies, scouts, infiltrators, and saboteurs. Their best outfit was not a black superhero suit. It was whatever made them look ordinary: farmer, monk, merchant, servant, traveler. The goal was to be forgettable, not to look like the official mascot of secrecy. The black ninja suit comes largely from Japanese kabuki theater. Stagehands dressed in black to signal they were invisible to the audience. When playwrights wanted a ninja to appear suddenly, dressing the actor like a stagehand created a clever surprise. Audiences loved it, the image stuck, and people later mistook a theater trick for historical truth. Real ninja were less dark warrior and more guy you ignored at the market, which was exactly why you were in trouble. 23. Western movies turn every frontier town into a dusty shooting gallery. Gunslingers duel at noon, saloon doors swing, bullets fly, and Main Street apparently has a daily corpse schedule. The real Wild West was often far more regulated. Many towns had strict gun rules. Dodge City, Tombstone, and Wichita required visitors to surrender firearms when entering town limits. The famous gunfight at the OK Corral began partly because the Earps were enforcing a local weapons ordinance. Some cattle towns had surprisingly low homicide numbers in many years, and in tiny communities, one murder could make statistics look dramatic. The average cowboy spent more time doing exhausting ranch work than staring dramatically across the street. But a realistic Western about a tired man herding cattle for 12 hours, eating beans, and falling asleep in a bowler hat would not sell as many tickets. Hollywood needed constant gunfire, so it gave the frontier a permanent action upgrade. 24. Joan of Arc in movies often becomes a teenage action hero in armor, sword raised, charging through English soldiers like medieval France just unlocked a secret boss. The real Joan was extraordinary, but not because she personally sliced through armies. At her trial, Joan said she carried her banner into battle, rather than using a weapon because she did not want to kill anyone. She said, "I have never killed a man." Later witnesses supported that. Her real power was leadership, strategy, and inspiration. She rallied demoralized French troops, helped shape siege tactics, and made soldiers believe God was backing their side. She was not safely watching from a balcony either. She was wounded multiple times, including by an arrow to the shoulder. But she led through conviction, not a kill count. Hollywood wants sword choreography. History gives us something stranger. A girl with a banner who changed a war and somehow needed fewer explosions to do it. 25. The Iron Maiden is the celebrity of torture devices. A human-shaped metal coffin filled with spikes, ready to close on a screaming victim like medieval customer service from hell. It is terrifying. It is also fake. There is no solid evidence that Iron Maidens were used in the Middle Ages. The famous examples appeared in the 1800s, often assembled from older parts and creative metalwork, then displayed for tourists who wanted to believe medieval people spent all day inventing horror furniture. It was basically a Victorian scare attraction with a fake medieval name tag. Real medieval torture was already horrifying enough with racks, thumbscrews, mutilation, and other very real nightmares. But apparently reality was not theatrical enough, so showmen invented a giant spiked coffin and sold it as history. Hollywood then adopted it because nothing says the past was terrible, like a metal death closet that never actually belonged there. 26. Medieval battles in movies look like two armies sprint into each other and immediately forget tactics, formations, and basic self-preservation. Everyone crashes together. Then it becomes thousands of dramatic one-on-one duels, like a medieval parking lot fight with swords. Real warfare was more organized. Armies fought in formations. Infantry held shield walls, spear lines, or pike blocks. Cavalry attacked specific points at specific moments, often aiming for flanks or weak spots. Commanders watched, adjusted, and sent orders through messengers, flags, horns, or officers. Battles involved feints, retreats, pressure, and attempts to break enemy formations. Armored men often fought in dense groups, pushing and grinding rather than spinning around heroically for camera angles. Individual combat happened, but it was not the whole plan. The real thing was deadly chess with mud, fear, and screaming. Hollywood turned it into a free-for-all because organized strategy is harder to sell than heroic hair flying in slow motion. 27. Pirate movies adore the plank scene. A prisoner shakes on a narrow board, waves crash below, and the captain laughs like he has been practicing villain sounds in the mirror. But walking the plank was mostly a fiction trope, not standard pirate procedure. The idea became famous through 19th-century adventure stories by writers like Robert Louis Stevenson and James Matthew Barrie. Historical evidence for real pirates commonly using it is extremely thin. Actual pirates were usually less theatrical and much nastier. They might throw someone overboard, maroon them on an island, or use keel hauling, which meant dragging a person under the ship across barnacles and rough wood. That punishment was so brutal the victim might drown, bleed badly, or wish the plank had been offered as the deluxe option. But keel hauling is messy and hard to put on a children's adventure poster. A plank is clean, simple, and dramatic. Fiction gave pirates a wooden catwalk, and Hollywood never returned it. 28. Chivalry sounds romantic now. Shining knights, noble manners, cloaks over puddles, love poems, and medieval men behaving like armored boyfriends from a prestige drama. But chivalry began much more practically. It was tied to aristocratic military behavior, loyalty to a lord, courage in battle, treatment of prisoners, mercy among nobles, and the rules of elite warfare. The romance part was expanded later by poets and troubadours, especially in 12th century France, who turned knights into literary heartthrobs and fused chivalry with courtly love. Real knights were professional fighters and landholders. Some were cultured, sure. Many were brutal, practical, and more concerned with war, money, loyalty, and estates than candlelit sonnets. Their job was not to be handsome next to a rosebush. Hollywood took the poetry version and pretended it was daily life. That is like assuming modern soldiers spend their evenings writing romantic haiku while polishing a tank. 29. Disney's Pocahontas gives us a beautiful romance between a Native American woman and English explorer John Smith, with love somehow solving colonization through songs and wind effects. The real story is not remotely that. When Smith arrived in the Chesapeake Bay area in 1607, Pocahontas, whose real name was Amanute and who was also known as Matawaka, was around 10 or 11 years old. Smith was 27. There was no romance. The famous rescue scene where she saves Smith from execution was not mentioned by Smith until 1616, almost a decade later and only after Pocahontas had become famous in England. Many historians think he exaggerated or invented it. Later, Pocahontas was kidnapped by English colonists, converted to Christianity, married John Rolfe, traveled to England, and died at about 21. Her life was political, tragic, and shaped by colonial power. Hollywood turned that into a love story because reality was apparently too uncomfortable for a sing-along. 30. Pirate fiction loves buried treasure. A torn map, a mysterious island, a big X, and a chest of gold waiting patiently like pirates had excellent long-term storage habits. But buried pirate treasure is almost entirely a literary fantasy. There is one widely confirmed case. Captain William Kidd buried loot on Gardiner's Island near New York in 1699 before his arrest. One pirate, one stash. That tiny historical crumb somehow fed an entire genre. Real pirates were not saving for retirement. They usually spent plunder fast on rum, gambling, food, weapons, clothes, and port town chaos because tomorrow they might be dead, arrested, or shot by someone with better aim. Burying treasure on a random island and drawing a helpful map would be absurd for crews who barely knew where they would be next month. Treasure Island, published by Robert Louis Stevenson in 1883, made the myth explode. One novel gave pirates their favorite fake hobby, aggressive underground banking. 31. Hollywood medieval peasants dressed like color was illegal unless you owned a castle. Brown, gray, muddy, torn, repeat. Everyone looks like a depressed potato sack. But ordinary medieval clothing was often much brighter. Peasants had access to natural dyes from plants and minerals. Woad produced blues. Weld made yellows. Madder created reds. Mixing dyes produced greens, oranges, and other shades. Expensive colors and luxury fabrics belonged to elites, of course, but common people were not sentenced to lifelong mud cosplay. Art from the period and surviving textile evidence show that ordinary clothing could be colorful. The gray-brown peasant uniform is a filmmaker shortcut. It instantly tells viewers poor and miserable without needing dialogue. Historically, a village could look more like a rough farmer's market than a post-apocalyptic laundry basket. Hollywood gave peasants the mud filter because poverty apparently needs color grading. 32. Jurassic Park taught millions of people that if a Tyrannosaurus Rex is staring at you, just freeze, because its vision is based on movement. Great scene. Terrible survival advice. Paleontologists studying Tyrannosaurus skulls have found forward-facing eyes and strong depth perception. Its binocular vision may have been around 55 degrees, even wider than a modern hawk's. And hawks are not famous for missing lunch because lunch stood still. A real Tyrannosaurus would not look at a frozen human and say, "Where did the snack go?" It would see you standing there, sweating, blinking, and mentally updating your will. The movement-based vision idea was made for movie tension, not science. Steven Spielberg gave us an unforgettable moment, but if a real Tyrannosaurus ever noticed you, freezing would not turn you invisible. It would only make you a very polite, motionless appetizer. So here is the real question. Which Hollywood history lie deserves to be dragged into the courtroom next? Name the worst offender in the comments, and do not be polite. If the movie fooled millions, I want it exposed. And if this video ruined at least one historical fact you confidently believed, hit like and subscribe because clearly Hollywood cannot be trusted without adult supervision.